Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Tuesday, October 6th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'm joined today by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. We're chatting some Week 5 NFL, and we're going to talk about the Shriners Hospitals for Children Open out at TPC Summerlin, this week's PGA Tour event. We're a little bit pressed for time today, just a little bit, because we got the NHL draft today, and Brian's got a lot of stuff to talk about with that on Vegas Hockey Hotline. Definitely encourage you to check that out over at kshp.com later on today. We got a lot of stuff going on over at ats.io for you to check out. We got updates on some of the top sportsbook promotions in the business here for this week. We cover industry news, sportsbook reviews, all sorts of picks and predictions, all kinds of great stuff over at ats.io. You can check out our ATS YouTube page for videos from Brian, as well as some highlight videos here from ATS Radio. And make sure you download and subscribe to all of the editions of ATS Radio, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you stream and download your podcast content, including today's edition of the Bettor's Box, where I talked about the ALDS as well as the NLDS. With that, we bring on today's guest, Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. And Brian, how's it going today, man?
All right, Adam, a lot on the plate, bud. We get the golf tournament here in Vegas, the NHL draft today, tomorrow, free agency Friday, baseball playoffs, they're hitting the cover off the ball, and the football, if we can get by this week, let's see what happens with Tennessee. That was a pretty scary moment last week with the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game canceled, and then the Pats-Chiefs game seemed to be highly in doubt, but they were able to get it in. So let's see if things calm down on the NFL front in that regard.
Yeah, I think that despite losing the Titans and Steelers game, I think it was actually a pretty positive week for the NFL on the COVID front, because they found out that a lot of their protocols work, and they also found out that it seems like there were some players for the Titans that were infected at the time they were playing the Vikings and managed not to give it to the Vikings. The Vikings had all negative tests throughout the week. They were able to play their game against the Texans without a hitch. The only casualty in that game was actually Bill O'Brien. So I think it was a pretty good week for the NFL in the sense that their protocols worked. They've erred on the side of caution with contact tracing and things like that. But, the Vikings didn't get it from playing against a team that had it. And I think that's a really good thing and really positive going forward for the NFL.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point, because it's funny. I always thought this, and I swear I've only heard them start talking about this the last week. The viral upload. If you start to hear this now, and I'm an idiot. I'm no doctor, but I always thought that this thing, the severity of it, might be based on the amount of it that you got. If you get it in passing and you got a little, maybe it's a lighter case. Or if you're just in proximity to someone for an elongated period of time and you get a boatload of it in you, then it would get worse. And no one ever talked about that. And all of a sudden now they're talking about this viral upload. So from the only reason I bring it up, not trying to sound like a doctor, but you're right. I mean, you fall on a pile for a fumble. You're around a guy for 5 seconds. You get up. If you get it, maybe you get a little, and it's not a real severe case, or you're not getting it all because you're outdoors. Who the hell knows with this thing?
Yeah, I think that from the start, I think for both of us, the messaging and the presentation of information has, been something that's been pretty frustrating throughout the process. But to your point, I saw a doctor with a study a few weeks ago saying that, the wearing of a mask in some ways increases your immunity because you're not blocking all of the COVID particles and the aerosols and all of that, but you're blocking most of them. So your body is still to a degree getting some of the illness, but not enough of it to make you really sick. So your body, through wearing a mask and through, getting some of the droplets and all of that, is actually developing some kind of protection, against if you got a bigger case of the illness, that viral upload that you're talking about. And maybe we kind of see that sort of theory or that, study playing out here with the fact that, again, Titans players had it. Vikings players were probably exposed to small, microscopic degrees of it. and it wasn't really enough to create that positive test. So this is probably a good thing for the NFL going forward, as I said, because, again, now there's talk of this possibly being a very seasonal thing to the point where it gets worse here late October, November, on into December. Maybe it gives us some hope that, if one team gets it, we won't wind up with any kind of league-wide outbreak as a result of playing against that team or those teams. So, again, I think that, we lost a game, and we're still uncertain about Tennessee getting back on the field here for Wednesday, reopening their facility, all of that. But at least we found, maybe some measure of hope. And with each passing day, the more we find out about this and the more that these teams and these leagues find out about it, the better equipped they're going to be. And
seriously, I mean, not to diminish this or become political about, overnight, Connor McDavid with the Oilers, he gets the virus. I mean, obviously the bubble is no more in the NHL. But of all the people and players in sports, the college kids, those that have gotten it, I mean, has anyone really fallen extremely ill, or has there been a calamity? I think the fear with football teams might be assistant coaches and older people that are around them. But these athletes, you get the thing, and thankfully, which seems to be what we've been told, that there are high risk factors, and these are younger people that are in phenomenal shape, and nothing cataclysmic has happened to them. And it's these are things we're all dealing with on a daily basis. But these are people, for the most part, get it, get over it, and get back to work.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple offhand I can think of. There were the concerns with myocarditis with the college football players, and I thought it was always interesting that it was talked about a lot at the collegiate level and never really talked about at all at the NFL level. So I thought, that was kind of weird. The one that I can really think of is Eduardo Rodriguez, the pitcher for the Red Sox, did wind up getting a pretty severe case of myocarditis, wasn't able to play this baseball season at all. And in fact, he was hospitalized for a lengthy period of time. But that's really the only one that I can think of that was a very extreme case. But again, it was an issue related to having COVID. It wasn't from, COVID and breathing problems and all of that.
It does not mirror. I mean, like I said, this is a discussion. We watch this stuff and you get mixed messages depending on what TV channel you watch, which is insanity. But does it not speak to, unfortunate for him, but do we stop the world spinning? Unfortunately, one guy had a very bad case of this thing. Do we get on with our lives, and when?
Well, and you think about it too. I mean, you get the Saints one with the fullback. It wound up being a false positive, but I mean that broke, Friday or Saturday night, and then there was talk of maybe canceling that game. For the Saints, I mean, you go from thinking, oh, we're not going to play, to then all of a sudden being able to play because it's a false positive. The Cam Newton one, obviously, that one breaking Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, they still wind up playing that game. Again, I think we saw a lot of positives, at least on the COVID front, because they were able to play these games. And nobody even talked about it last week, but A.J. Terrell, the defensive back for Atlanta, got it. And, it wasn't talked about at all because he's not of the magnitude of Cam Newton.
Exactly. But the thing is, okay, let's see what happens. Do the Titans suit up and play against the Bills? Because what's that number? In the 20 range now. If a 1 week off, if they're able to come back and play, but specifically Cam Newton, that this word comes out, I guess was it Saturday morning?
Yeah, it was late Saturday morning, Saturday early afternoon. Yeah.
So if Cam Newton suits up and plays in 8 days, there's almost a barometer of what we're looking at moving forward. And the one thing that we've talked about is the big impact is, who gets sick? I mean, you're talking about the quarterback of a football team. That's it's a lot different than a left guard.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And it's also going to get, a lot more fanfare and a lot more run when it's a big name player as opposed to, I
like your style, though. I like your thinking that at the end of the day, if we get through this week, that maybe there is – a positive result there, that they're able to survive this thing, the league, and soldier forward on this. Because, listen, I mean, it wasn't your first reaction go, well, okay, Tennessee, Pittsburgh's canceled. Oh, it impacts Baltimore. They got to move their bye week. So there's 3 teams where you have absolutely, okay, you made your move. You have no wiggle room with these guys. But now we're going to have angles that we're going to talk about. If Tennessee does come back and play, all of a sudden the Buffalo's facing Tennessee coming off a bye instead of Tennessee getting beat up by Pittsburgh. Or you can make the case Tennessee sat idly by. They may have been on a bye, but they weren't able to practice. And so you're going to start seeing we're going to be throwing the football angles of all this stuff in there. Don't kid yourself. The Chiefs thing, they were desperate to get that game played. And I'll tell you one reason, a big reason was the fantasy football aspect of that. That people didn't want Patrick Mahomes sitting on the sidelines, and if they canceled that game, they'd have derailed fantasy football. That's a billion-dollar industry. And, oh, by the way, the Chiefs got to play now Monday night, play the Raiders on Sunday, and then play at Buffalo on Thursday. They're sitting there going, this Chiefs thing, we got to get through this with these guys because if their schedule gets set off the train tracks, it goes to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, it really does. And, I guess the last point I'll kind of make here is, like you said, I think barometer is a good word, trying to figure out about Cam Newton, about, the availability of some of these Titans players, how things work in terms of how they come back. I don't know if it's 2 negative tests or 3 negative tests or whatever it is to bring these players back. But I also think back to Major League Baseball where, the Marlins had that big outbreak. They went out in Atlanta before the season. They had a preseason game. They went out afterwards. A bunch of guys got it. A bunch of Cardinals got it from going to a casino up in Minnesota. After that, we didn't see any large-scale outbreak. We saw, individual cases here and there. And the NFL released, one of those memorandums yesterday really tightening up the COVID protocols of saying, look, if you're not vigilant and we have to cancel games of yours and, your team is at fault, there will be fines. There could be forfeiture of draft picks, something like that. So now this also serves as a reminder and maybe a warning to all of the other teams out there. Hey, keep your shit together. Keep your people informed. Keep everybody on the same page.
It's easy to tell a threat.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree.
And the organization would have, but you're talking to, a 22-year-old kid that's just got a signing bonus and after a football game and they want to go out and raise holy hell. It's easy to threaten the football teams. The problem is you're trying to keep 100 guys in check.
Right. Well, they gave the coaches heavy fines for not wearing their masks when they were showing them on TV. They fined players for not wearing masks. There was one in Vegas there, with Darren Waller. They were big fines there because players weren't wearing masks, at this charity event. And, I guess the NFL is really going to crack down and we'll see, if that winds up being what allows us to get through a full NFL season here. But
sucks talking about this stuff, but it's part of it.
It does. And as you mentioned, there are handicapping implications, and we'll get to those in a second here. Just want to tell our listeners real quickly, we probably sound a little bit different. The video will look a little bit different. Trying this on Zoom today. I've had some Skype issues. I don't know if it's my internet provider. I don't know if it's Skype, but a good opportunity here to try this on Zoom, see if we can kind of troubleshoot the problem a little bit.
It was my idea.
It was your idea. It was Brian Blessing's idea. He's a tremendous asset to the show and to everyone here.
You're going to believe at the end of the day, you're going to go, good idea, idiot.
No, we'll see if it works. I mean, but you are a tremendous asset to us here at ATS.io, and hopefully this will allow us to get through this.
Hey, if this doesn't work for this podcast, you got every kid in the world getting educated on Zoom. It better work.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, to be sure here. But it gives us the opportunity to try again with one of these highlight videos from the ATS radio broadcast. Unable to do those on Monday with those audio issues I was just talking about. But wanted to get on here with Brian and talk about some Week 5 games, kind of give you some picks and predictions, insights and analysis, all of that here for this upcoming week. And Brian, you already did a video for us on the Thursday night game over on our ATS YouTube page between Tampa Bay and Chicago. So we won't spend time on that one, but we will jump ahead to Sunday here. And we were just talking about it. The Kansas City Chiefs, they play New England. Game gets pushed back a day. Obviously, tons of game planning goes into anytime you face Bill Belichick. Now you're a double-digit favorite against the Raiders with the Bills looming on a short week in week 6. Is this a good spot to take Las Vegas here?
Oof. 12.5 is a weird number, too. You know, part of me would say the Chiefs come out and light the Raiders up and say, let's get the big lead. And in a perfect world, maybe we can, get some of these guys out in the second half, get them a little bit of rest. Let's give the Patriots credit. Hoyer, Stidham, it was ugly, but that Patriots defense played their lungs out after the first drive, which, by the way, they held them to a field goal. Belichick made incredible adjustments and really frustrated that Chiefs offense. The one thing I would say, Jacobs is certainly a big X factor. The Bills actually pulled a Belichick move on the Raiders. I was looking at the scores when it was all said and done, Adam. Look at the teams that are, atop the standings. And we're all about the fantasy football, and look what Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson and Mahomes and even Josh Allen now, what they're doing. And that's the exciting thing, and it's the highlights. Look at the teams that have winning records. They are all teams that can run the football. I mean, you can sling it all over the place, but you better be able to close out games and establish the run when you need to. It's still a viable part of this game. And the Bills, the key to their win, the week before, they had the big comeback, and the Rams got back in the game with Henderson running it down their throat. So everybody's like, well, Jacobs is going to run it down their throat. He's a terrific running back, and he's their best player. The Bills put it in the box and shut him down. And basically, they had a couple of plays over the top. One was a bomb that was called back for a touchdown, the Raiders, to Aguilar. And then they had an interference call late in the game. But the Bills basically took Jacobs away. I'd look for the Chiefs to do the same thing. Can Carr beat you over the top? And with Ruggs not in there, these guys are NFL receivers. They'll get a play or two or a chance or two. But I think the Bills actually put a pretty good blueprint out there to give the Raiders a hard time.
Yeah, and kind of with that sentiment in mind, as terrifying as it is to play an under in the NFL right now, I kind of like under 57 in that game. I think this is one where, as you kind of talked about, the Chiefs try to get out early, and then they try to put it in cruise control and save some bullets, save some legs, save some guys for that quick turnaround against Buffalo, a game that, at this point in time may end up having some, playoff implications in terms of home field and something like that. So I think maybe you look under 57 here in this Vegas-Kansas City game. The concern for me with Vegas on the spread is that Derek Carr cannot go vertical. They are checking down a ton. He's just not comfortable throwing downfield for one reason or another. If they do get behind and have to play catch-up, that worries me. Now, they could get yards in chunks, 8, 10, 12 at a time throwing underneath against that soft defense from the Chiefs. Maybe that also hurts the under here. But, again, I think Kansas City will put themselves in a position where they are ahead at halftime, can pony up a little bit in the second half if they need to. But I think they try to go running clock as much as possible in this game. I kind of like the under in that one.
Yeah, and honestly, the number, like I said, you go broke in the NFL laying double digits. If that scenario we're talking about is in play where KC gets the lead and maybe say, look, we got to turn around, I don't know that they do or don't. It's just something to consider, that they maybe take some guys out knowing they have to play again on Thursday. Then the backdoor cover certainly could be in play with a garbage touchdown at the end.
All right, so how about this game here? 459, 460, Jacksonville and Houston. Houston, 6-point favorite, total of 54. And you know the reason why I want to ask you about this game. Bill O'Brien, the first coach to get fired. Kudos to anybody who had that one in the 9-1 range. I think a lot of us thought Adam Gase. A lot of us thought Dan Quinn. And Dan Quinn will probably be the second head coach fired here. Should have already been fired, quite frankly. But what about Houston here? They're 0-4. They're not going to make the playoffs at this point, probably, unless they really turn things around. But they no longer have Bill O'Brien there. Is this a 1-week bump for them? Is Jacksonville that bad that Houston can cover? Any thoughts on that game?
Jacksonville is that inconsistent. You have a good game against Indy, and then you get mauled by other teams. 1 week to the next, I can't get a read on Jacksonville. The funny thing is, Marone was another guy who very much was on the list of a coach that could get fired. Got a little bit of equity with that opening week win. The problem with this game, Adam, is you can't trust either one of these teams. That's the real to sit here with conviction and say what is. The one thing I would say that could be of use is this number is 6.5 minus a dime. If you think, Romeo Crennel knows what he's doing. He's been around the block. He's the oldest coach in the league now. But if you think it's Houston, bet it now because it's going to get to 7.
Yeah, I think there's a chance it probably does go up. There were so many people that were so anti-Bill O'Brien, and for good reason. I mean, I've gotten Bill O'Brien several times betting on the Texans over the last few years. And, look, I also think, too, that, this is probably a scenario. I know that they've won some division titles and all of that, but they did so, with negative point differentials or just ugly peripheral stats. This is a team that, probably overachieved in spite of Bill O'Brien. Now you wonder about Deshaun Watson. Does he kind of open things up a little bit? Do they play without that dark cloud over their heads of knowing that this could have been a possibility at some point? I think that's kind of an interesting one. But
you know what? I just interject. The one thing I would say is anybody as good as they look or as bad as they look? Houston, you looked at the gauntlet they played, Kansas City, Baltimore, on the road at Pittsburgh, and then, Minnesota was the straw that broke the camel back. Well, it was a battle of 0-3 teams. But really, at the beginning of the year, you might not have thought they were, the division winners, but did you think Minnesota, was like this 0-3 kind of team? I mean, they're a 500 team and with upside, and you got a running back in Cook, and I think the emergence of Jefferson opposite Thielen now because they missed Diggs mightily. It seems like maybe Minnesota's getting their act together. So everybody's like, they lost to 0-3 Minnesota. Well, Minnesota maybe is not that bad, because listen, buddy, we were doing these podcasts during the summer months. We can't ignore the stuff that we talked about weeks ago. We said there are going to be teams that handle this thing well and teams that handle it miserably. And I've said we did videos on this. We talked about normally week 1 to week 2, there's your adjustments, your power rankings, maybe into week 3 a little bit historically. But week to week, we see these massive shifts in the number. But we talked about it may take a month to know who these teams are because there was no real contact in training camp. There were no preseason games. Maybe Minnesota gets their head out of their backside and turns into a decent football team. Now this shakeup, Houston, look at the gauntlet they played. The one if you were going to poke holes at them, the only one you could poke holes at them was, you're 0-3 and you lost at home to Minnesota. But Minnesota was as desperate as they were. So that's of the 4, that's the only one I think you can really poke holes at Houston for losing. But I just think now we kind of know who these teams are, but some of them are going to turn a corner, a handful of them. We talked about it all summer.
Yeah, and I think the thing for Minnesota, too, is, look, they're averaging well over 6 yards per play. They're averaging over 6.5 yards per play. It's the defense that's not any good. So, yeah, they were an 0-3 team. They've got flaws, but they're still, a top 10, top 5 caliber offense in the NFL right now from a statistical standpoint. So that's still a challenging situation for a Houston team that, has kind of a drought at the skill positions with some of the transactions that Bill O'Brien's made. They can never protect Deshaun Watson, stuff like that. But I do want to get to the Minnesota-Seattle game because you just talked about Minnesota. Yeah. And I know that even though we're looking at a total here, basically in the 58 range, you're still looking for a lot of points in this game.
I think it goes over. But the thing I was just going to say, the final note, and it bleeds into this game. Look at Dallas. The numbers Russell Wilson's been putting up, they should be murdering teams. They're all close football games. Seattle's a mangled mess in their secondary injury-wise. And the one thing across the league, I think tackling sucks.
Oh,
I think
bad.
That's
it's really bad
thing with no preseason games and training camp with minimal contact. that these guys literally are just to the point now, you've played 4 games. Maybe the tackling will start to improve, but that's been horrific. But Seattle, their secondary, even Adams is hurt now. They're a disaster. Look at the Cowboys secondary. But Minnesota can score with Cook. And we mentioned the weapons already with Thielen, now the emergence of Jefferson. They can score. And Russell Wilson is just incredible what he's been doing. And Carson beat the rap on the injury, and he's back, and he's running like a horse. I don't see either team's the prop would be under 1.5 punts in the game.
Yeah, the thing I worry about a little bit for Seattle here is going back east to west. We saw San Francisco really struggle in that situation here this weekend, but also San Francisco, everybody's hurt. And, Seattle doesn't really have that problem. And they have Russell Wilson, who, quite frankly, I think Russell Wilson's the best quarterback in the NFL. I mean, what he does with what he, has to work with what he's had to work with, the guy is just exceptional. So I think that, we could definitely see a lot of points in that one. And I encourage you to check out Brian's other videos here on our ATS YouTube page, including where he took a look at the game on Monday Night Football between the Chargers and the Saints right here on our ATS YouTube page. And make sure you subscribe to ATS Radio across all of those different podcast platforms. Brian, we'll go ahead and go back-to-back with the feature videos here. I know you got the NHL draft today, so you're kind of a little bit pressed for time, but I wanted to talk about the start of this Vegas doubleheader here on the PGA Tour. The Shriners Hospitals for Children open this week at TPC Summerlin. Next week, the CJ Cup at Shadow Creek, which I'm very much looking forward to. But this tournament here this week at TPC Summerlin, you and I were talking before we started recording here, this is the best field for this tournament in 32 years. Bryson DeChambeau, Webb Simpson, Patrick Cantlay, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Matsuyama, Harris English, Matt Wolff, Scotty Scheffler, Jason Day, Ricky Fowler, Sergio Garcia, who won last week at the Sanderson Farms. Really, really good field this week, Brian.
And usually this tournament, I think the rub was they didn't come out here because it was a putting tournament. The winning scores in the low to mid-20s. I play TPC Summerlin a couple of times a year. I mean, these guys eat this course alive. But if they grew the rough and had some snarky pin placements, believe me, they could make the score a lot different than it is. But the quality players are showing up now, and we're seeing it. The FedEx Cup is a big deal, and these are full FedEx Cup point events, and the named players are showing up. And I think the angle, go to PGAtour.com. There's a really cool article in there about so many guys on the tour are now gravitating and living in Vegas. Xander Schauffele said, I'm moving there. Colin Morikawa lives right up the street here, or plays right up the street here. Literally about 2,000 yards from where I'm doing this video. Kevin Na lives here. He's won this event twice. What does that tell you? He knows the course. So I think there's a starting point. You look at guys like that, and the price guy in there in that group is Aaron Wise, who is always, if you read this article, they're always playing games and working on their game. But Aaron Wise is a kid that can play, but he's here all the time. He's 80-1. We all know about Morikawa. Watch out for a guy like Aaron Wise to make a little run here.
Yeah, and I think it's the important thing. You sort of look at the player profile for what you want to take in this tournament, and ball striking is very important, as it is week in and week out. As you said, the rough is not very penal here, so you can hit it a long way and go ahead and take whatever medicine you wind up with and be perfectly fine with doing it. The other part is that you got a guy like Kevin Na that did not play well in a lot of strokes gained areas last year, but he almost lapped the field in strokes gained putting. He made virtually every putt on this course, and a guy like him can do that. A guy like, a JT Poston can do that. We've seen guys like a Bo Hostler play well here. He doesn't do a whole lot of things well except hit the putter. So that's kind of what you're looking at here this week is, do you take the ball strikers at the short prices? Like I like Webb Simpson this week. I like Harris English this week. Or do you take the guys that are really good with the flat stick that have the longer prices?
There's no rough. And like I said, honestly, I played this course. And which is always fun to watch when you go, oh, I was there. I know what he's facing. That's kind of enjoyable. But the funny thing is, on certain holes, I have my moments on this course where these guys are so good as their distance control. And the real unique feature of these TPC layouts, every green are triple tier greens, but they are substantially different tiers. I mean, their distance control, they're always 15. The guy that win it, he's 8 feet to the pin. The other guy, if you're 25 feet, your percentages are obviously much different. But if you're not on the right level, there are 3 putts all over the place on this course. That's why these guys like this course up, because their distance control is so good. They're always on the right level. But at the end of the day, it's a putting tournament. This event is a putting tournament. So look at a guy like Matt Kuchar, who had a really quiet year. Was out of nowhere. I think it's like a Sergio showing up last week. A higher end guy, first win since the Masters, but kind of a higher end name guy wins the Sanderson Farms. In the past, you weren't getting name guys like that in these tournaments. So you get a name guy like Kuchar showing up in this thing, who's very much coming in here under the radar. But if he's putting good, he can get away with subpar ball striking. The other guy that is playing good that I thought was a nice overlay price was Cameron Davis, who played well at the Sanderson Farms.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, looking at the BetMGM prices here, I like Webb Simpson at 12-1 among the short prices. He's as close to DeChambeau as we get in this field. Yeah, and in terms of ball striking and putting, he's right there with DeChambeau. So I think at 12-1, he's worth a look. Like I said, Harris English at 25-1. A guy some people may like is Patrick Cantlay. 2 runners up and a win here. So he's played very, very well. But again, there are some guys that are just great putters that are down the board here. Like a Poston at 80-1, Christopher Ventura at 80-1. He kind of fits the same mold as a Kevin Na type. The difference is Kevin Na, plays here all the time, as you mentioned, knows these putting surfaces really well. But you mentioned Aaron Wise at 80-1, Cameron Davis, a guy at 50-1. So I think you and I just have 2 schools of thought here. I'm kind of taking the shorter prices in the strong field, and you're looking at the guys that have bigger numbers that fit the profile.
I generally do that anyway.
Right.
And I'll come back and get a Webb Simpson on Friday night at maybe a higher price if he's 4 or 5 shots back. To me, when the course is set up for these guys to go low, the tougher courses separate the cream from the crop. This is the kind of tournament you should be searching for a bomb. And then you can find the name player at the same price on Friday night, or maybe even an overlaid price on Friday night. But to me, to sit there and play somebody at 15-1 when the winning score is going to be 23 under par, I personally think you're better off and better suited to swing for the fences and get a guy like that in contention, and then say, here's the name guy who's 4 shots back. And after Friday night, I'm separating the 10 or 12 really high-end name players, separate them out, that one of them is, within striking distance, and that's when you play those guys.
The last thing I would say here, and who knows, maybe he'll go out there and win this tournament, but a guy like Hideki Matsuyama, you can't take him in an event like this. Great ball striker, can't putt. So that's the biggest thing. If you're handicapping this golf tournament, make sure that you're getting, at least an above average to elite putter here, with the guys that you're backing. For the Shriners Hospitals for Children Open at TPC Summerlin.
You mentioned they're here again next week, too. That's probably another reason that this field was so big. I think the what is it? The 9 Bridges is going to be
CJ Cup, yeah.
The CJ, but was that CJ Cup at 9 Bridges? Then is that what that was?
Yeah, over in South Korea.
Yeah, but I think the fact that there were tournaments here back to back weeks probably made a lot of these guys say, well, I don't want to miss 2 tournaments, but oh, by the way, I can go play, settle in, and not have to travel somewhere. That they looked at the back-to-back week nature of this thing, saying that's pretty appealing, and I'm going to do it. And I think the fact that tournament's at Shadow Creek has mightily helped the quality of the field for this week too.
Well, and then one last point here is just to say that guys that miss the cut this weekend probably aren't going to go home. They're probably just going to stay in their rental place or whatever they're doing, and
Go
they're
to
probably going
Shadow
to take the
Creek.
weekend and go play Shadow Creek. So
I'm going to go to Shadow Creek and practice.
right. So look for guys that, maybe really good players that missed the cut here this week.
Good one.
They're going to get some extra rounds next week at Shadow Creek for sure.
I like that one. That's a good angle. I like that a lot.
Well, I like to think we talk about a lot of good angles here on ATS Radio and on these highlight videos over on our ATS YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page and also subscribe to get ATS Radio wherever you stream and download your podcast content. With that, like I said, like we talked about at the top of the show, Brian, big day for you. NHL draft the next couple of days, NHL free agency later on this week. You'll be covering a lot of that, I would presume, not just on Vegas Hockey Hotline, but probably on Sportsbook Radio as well.
Yeah, no, listen, the first round of the NHL draft is tonight, but the one thing that's going on here, this draft is not in June. We're sitting here with training camps, whatever, 6 weeks away, January 1 target date to start the next year. But you also have expansion coming up with Seattle, and guys are going to start moving guys now to at least get something for them instead of losing them unprotected to expansion. You've got salary caps, flat salary caps, teams that have put internal salary cap restrictions on their own spending spree. So names are available that are out there in addition to the name free agents that are out there. I think this could be an incredibly active week, and free agencies is on Friday. So the dominoes are really going to start to go here, starting with the draft tonight. I think the trades, there might be a couple today that everybody will be focused on round one tonight. But tomorrow I look for the wheeling and dealing to start. And the goalie market's insane. Goalies that are out there ready to go on the move. So it's have a big impact on how these teams are constructed for next year. And it's all compacted into a week later in the year. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it definitely is. Make sure you follow Brian on Twitter at Brian Blessing. Check out sportsbookradio.com as well as kshp.com. And check out his videos over on our ATS YouTube page. Brian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate you sticking with me here with some of the technical issues, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Well, hey, buddy, here I can't just I'm not the Star Trek guy. I'll put them together. There, fingers crossed, kid, that this Zoom thing works.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. There you go. There's Brian Blessing, once again, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Brian Blessing. Coming up on Thursday, we'll chat with professional handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. College football week 6, NFL week 5, and then Friday, my thoughts for week 5 in the Circa Sports Million. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again on Thursday.